This episode of the Closeout Bodyboarding podcast is proudly presented to you by Limited Edition Fins. Shane, I've always wanted to know, what's the big difference between the original Limited Edition fins and the new Psylocke fins?
Benny, the Psylocke fins are bigger and wider than the original LE foot pockets. So basically when you try them on, they'll actually be a size up. Psylocke's fit really well in half sizes to the original fins. So I used to not be able to fit into the larges in the original LE fins, but I fit perfectly into the Psylocke large. So I just recommend everyone, if you weren't comfortable in the original LEs, go in and try on a new Psylocke's.
Awesome. Thanks, Shane. Back to you in the studio. Welcome back to the Closeout Bodyboarding podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Benny Oborn. Generally, it's a few good mates sitting around to talk about all things bodyboarding, but tonight, it's just me. I'm all alone in this strange place known as the Gold Coast. However, I'm very lucky to have a great friend of mine, also a mentor, someone I've looked up to for many, many years, and someone I've seeked out plenty of advice from, although he's impossible to track down these days. Former owner of Inverted Bodyboard Shop, former World Tour judge, former Gold Coast lifeguard, one of the brains behind the infamous Aussie Buccaneers tour of South Africa, and now a lawyer and new parent, Danny Bycroft. Welcome to the potty, Hasselhoff.
Oh, thanks, Benny. Gee, what an intro. I think there was enough dot points there. I don't know if we missed any, but yeah, there could have been a few other weird and wonderful jobs along the way there.
Oh, we try to keep it PG, mate, but there was definitely a few that I specifically left out.
I think anything that happens after 3 a.m., probably not too good for a G-rated podcast, but we can keep moving on. But really good to see you, mate. Great to have you up here on the Gold Coast, and we've missed you up here. Everyone remembers your time up here, and every time you come back, there's always a lot of people wanting to catch up with you and talk about the good old times when you were ruling the roost up here, buddy.
Oh, mate, and look, I obviously missed the place. I was here for 13 glorious years, but I'm just currently in a different chapter of my life. I'm married with 2 beautiful kids. So for now, my focus is obviously them and, doing some career stuff as well. But, mate, before we get started on you, obviously, I'm a family man, but you're also now a family man, mate. A fresh father, little boy, Cliffy.
Yeah. About 6 months ago, we welcomed little Cliffy into the world, Clifford James Bycroft. So I was only married in July of last year, and one of the quickest, got to work as quick as anyone's ever got to. About 2 days later, the little fella was conceived.
Penalty shootout.
It was a penalty shootout. We made a bit of a joke that, if we were going to be naming him after where he was conceived, we wouldn't know whether it was Bali, the Maldives, or Jetstar.
Mate, so obviously, yeah, again, 2 days after you were married, beautiful wife, Lou. How'd you guys meet?
Mate, I'd love to, come up with a more romantic story, but we actually met on Bumble.
Right.
And it weirdly ended up that we're in the same sort of friendship groups and probably had bumped into each other a few times before, but we met on Bumble, and then I realised that she'd actually castrated my dog a few years before. So she firstly got my dog's balls, and then she's
got yours.
She nipped mine a few years later. So, mate, she's on a pretty good run.
So Lou, obviously a veterinary nurse.
Correct.
Yep. Don't be afraid to admit you met her on Bumble, mate. I'm pretty sure Dylan Beach met his beautiful wife on Bumble as well.
Yeah.
Obviously a great community of great people.
It is.
Yeah, so obviously first and foremost, big congratulations. New chapter in your life. But let's just strip it back to the very beginning, mate. How old are you now? 40. Just celebrated the milestone event.
Yeah, that's it. I actually just got back from Bali last weekend, and over there for about 3 weeks with friends and family celebrating the 40th. So, gee, time flies quick, mate. When you look back at some of the old photos of the Inverted days and growing up in the old North Burleigh Bodyboard Club in high school, from then till 40 just seems like a blink of the eye, and now it's here.
Yeah, it's pretty chaotic, isn't it?
It is. It's scary. Well, the scariest thing is, and, I'm sure some of the other guys that you've interviewed on here and some of your listeners are getting to that age, is that when you're 40, the next thing you're celebrating is 50. And going to a 50th with one of your mates and high-fiving him for that just feels a bit weird.
It's daunting.
It is. You're an old man.
Yeah, I've obviously been lucky to celebrate some of my close mates' 50th in the last few years. Mick Parkhill's in his 50 now. Shano's in his 50s. Another guy, Blair Johnston, 50. Yeah, crazy. Crazy.
Yep.
But, mate, let's talk about where you're currently residing, where we're actually sitting right now and recording this potty.
Yeah, so back to the roots, actually. We're on the beach down here at Burleigh Heads now, and been lucky enough, it's a bit of a still night here, so been able to come up and produce the potty up on the rooftop, overlooking the beach. Only a couple of streets away from where the old original inverted store,
the stomping grounds,
first popped up, which has now been bulldozed, and it's a high rise.
You're joking.
It's a high rise down there now called the Sandbar, and there's like a 7-Eleven shop there with some guy in there selling vapes.
Oh dear Lord!
So they're probably selling more products than we used to when we had the inverted there. But yeah, we're down on the beach here at Burleigh now. That's where we live. That's where I want my sort of family to grow up. I'm originally from the Sunshine Coast, from Noosa, but moved down to the Gold Coast when I was quite young. Grew up around the Broadbeach, kind of Mermaid Beach area.
So where were you going to school down here on the Goldie?
I went to Broadbeach Primary School.
So not the infamous Miami High?
No, Broadbeach Primary School, mate. And then I got a scholarship to go to one of the private schools out the back of the Gold Coast called All Saints.
Right. You don't really fit the profile of an All Saints guy, I'll be honest.
Yeah, probably because I grew up at a ratty primary school with a whole bunch of mongrels. Like Paul Fisher was in the grade beneath me.
Wow.
He was one of my younger brother's best friends, so we used to knock around with him all the time. A fair few other guys that are now sort of half famous surfers. But yeah, I was just sort of the lucky one where I used to muck around a little bit at school, but I think someone out at All Saints saw something in me and gave me a scholarship to go out there.
Was it based on certain kind of skill sets or?
Yeah, it was academic.
Yep.
Academic stuff based on.
Any particular kind of section of academics? Was it maths?
No, I wasn't a maths guy. I was like a sort of English, kind of modern history, geography kind of guy. And for whatever reason, I actually enjoyed that area of learning.
Yep.
And my mum's a teacher, so she was pretty diligent in keeping us on track, in check and on track with homework. And from a really young age, our family's travelled a lot as well. So even from grade 5 or younger, my mum and my stepdad used to pull us out of school and go on these big 6 or 8 week holidays around Europe, around Asia, and just sort of learnt a lot. Doing that type of thing.
Gives you a really early dose of culture, which a lot of people just don't have the opportunity to do.
Correct. Yep.
Where in Europe back in the day? Where was, I guess, some of those go-to spots back then?
Mate, we used to do these big camper van trips.
No way.
Yeah. So, now being a new father, I just shudder to think how they used to do it, because they used to have. I was about probably 10 years old. My brother was 7, and my younger sister was only like 2 or 3.
Wow.
And they'd bundle us into like these camper vans for like 6 weeks and cruise around staying in these dodgy little caravan parks in Italy and, down on the French Riviera, just the cheapest, nastiest little caravan parks you could find. 3 ratty kids, the parents all using one toilet, eating 2-minute noodles, trying to bumble your way through different languages and different borders with your passports. And as a parent, it'd be a nightmare. But, so thankful that my parents were able to take me through that.
So let's talk about your parents. Obviously, I know your mum well.
Yep.
Beautiful lady. And obviously, yeah, I first met her through the shop.
Yep.
Give us a bit of a insight into your wonderful mother.
Yeah, well, today's actually a pretty special day because she's just retired.
No way.
So
then how come she's not sitting here at the table with us?
She should be. I'm sure she's having a gin somewhere. She had her 70th birthday this year, and she spent a lot of time in the public education system, and she sort of finished off her career at Bond University here on the Goldie, and
a place you know very well.
Yeah, and so today was her last ever day of teaching.
Wow.
So she's been sending us photos of all the nice presents kids have been giving her. So, yeah, growing up, my mum was a teacher. My dad, kind of a tradie sort of guy on the Sunshine Coast, builder, bit of a like jack of all trades.
Bit like yourself.
Yeah. He was actually the head lifeguard in Noosa for a little while.
Right, okay. The puzzle starts putting itself together.
It does. And then he, for whatever reason, got knocked off doing that. So started sort of doing some building work and tradie stuff in Noosa. But we all moved down here to the Gold Coast when I was about 6.
Yep.
And that's when I started living in Broadbeach, going to Broadbeach Primary, and started surfing around Broadie and out the front of Currawa Surf Club there with guys like Mitch Rawlins and some of the boys.
Never heard of him.
Yeah, no, either have I.
I am kidding, obviously. And speaking of Mitch Rawlins, some big news that's just kind of come out. Mitch has just been announced as one of the competitors for the pipe contest in 2025, which is huge.
Yeah.
Obviously great to see the pipe contest running again. Would be nice to see a few more Aussies in the mix. I think there's Kingy, Hardy, Mitch, and then Tommy Morris from WA. So part of the next gen. Hopefully we can see some more fill those gaps.
Mate, definitely. Yeah, and, isn't it funny that those sort of names just pop up and, memories sort of come flooding back. And just today when we were speaking about this potty, looking back on, some of Mitch's time on the world tour, and I saw a video that I think a Brazilian
just popped up the other day. Yeah,
filmer had popped up of him in Itacoatiara in about 2012 or something like that.
Mate, his inverts are so unique.
You could see that he had this hunger.
Oh yeah,
riding waves at that point. And I'd have to. I'm not going to. Don't know if I'm exactly right here, but I've got a feeling that was the year when it looked like he was on track to win the world tour.
Yep.
And because you could just see the hunger, and in that video, sort of half the videos at sort of massive Itacoatiara where he's just hitting those big ramps.
Yeah.
And the other half is when it's a bit smaller and you can see it's like a shorey.
Yep.
And he's in the comp rashi, and far out. The way he's surfing in that comp rashi is just incredible.
Well, he has one of the most beautiful and unique styles that I've seen in Australian bodyboarding. Obviously, you've got Hardy, who sits in that same category.
Yeah.
Guys like that are basically guys that everyone tries to model themselves off in terms of bodyboarding.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Anyway, we've gone off track there, mate.
A little bit, yep. But, yeah, so, what's the plans for your mum now that she's retired? Bit more travel?
Yeah, plenty more travel. She's my brother's sort of building high-end villas in Bali at the moment. He's built her one over there.
Amazing.
So I think she's going to spend a bit of time over there and back here a little bit and probably give back to the community.
Beautiful.
She does sort of English as a second language teaching.
Gotcha.
So she'll probably spend a bit of time in Indonesia and Southeast Asia sort of doing that.
And you and Lou and Cliffy will obviously be over there a little bit more now as well?
Of course.
Yep.
Yeah, we already spend a lot of time over there. Like we've got a couple of villas under construction over there, and also a bit of land that we're doing a few things with. But that's sort of the retirement plan at the moment, mate. Try and get a few little places over there that are bringing in you some income.
Yep.
So you don't need to keep working as hard here in Australia.
And speaking of work, you're obviously now practicing law. Again, you studied law at Bond. How did you get into studying law? Because at the time, you're also running a very successful bodyboard shop.
Yeah.
So you were juggling a lot.
Yeah. Well, it was, if we look at the chronology of it, I actually, the original owners of Inverted used to
The O'Sullivans.
The O'Sullivans, Kerry, Kiowa and Grant, legendary family.
Great people.
Yeah, legendary family here from Burleigh. And they used to, when I owned Inverted, they used to get pissed off because a lot of people thought I started Inverted.
Right.
Which I certainly didn't. I used to work in there for the O'Sullivans while I was at university.
Yep.
And I started meeting them from the North Burleigh Bodyboard Club back in the day and started just doing a few days in the shop. And Kerry and Grant had decided to sort of move out west and buy a pub.
Yep.
And they said to me, "Oh, well, you know, you're one of the only people working in here. Do you want to buy the shop office?"
How old were you at this stage?
Mate, I was probably 20...
Young.
22,
right?
I reckon, because I was at a weird stage because I'd just finished doing my law degree,
right,
at university. So I sort of I could go down one route, down the traditional sort of law, go and become an intern somewhere and earn your 20 grand a year and make coffee for the next 5 years for, you know, arsehole partners.
Be the bitch.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Or I had this sort of opportunity for something that was my passion. And, you know, in a sport that I really enjoyed doing, I enjoyed the people that were involved in it. But there was, you know, not much money in it at that point.
No.
So they offered to sell the shop to me, and I went home.
Which was a lease, just to be clear, right? It wasn't
Correct.
a freehold?
What wasn't the freehold, it was just the brand.
Yep.
It was the Inverted brand. And at that point, they only had the one shop.
Yep.
Here in Burleigh.
On the Gold Coast Highway in Burleigh Heads.
The original, the OG shop there next to McDonald's.
Absolutely.
I'd guess probably almost every bodyboarder in Australia has ever dropped into at one point in their life. So yeah, they offered to sell me the shop. I actually wasn't that interested in it. I was like, I'm just about to finish law school. You know, I got bigger fish to fry.
Yep.
And I went home and had a chat to my mum, and I told her the price that they were selling it for, and she was like, "Oh, you know, why don't you just buy it and just do it for a year or two? It'll just be a good way for you to learn about business, and you know, if the price is not, you know, they're not selling cheap stations here.
Yep.
You know, if it doesn't go well for a year or two, we'll just shut it down." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know if I'm too interested or not," but cut a long story short, mum lent me the money to buy it, and that's why, as you probably know, she was fairly involved in the whole.
Yeah, she sure was.
In the whole process, and so interestingly, when we took it over, there was hardly any stock in the shop, and you know how small the original
it was a tiny store.
Yeah, it's a tiny little store, the original one. When we first took it over, I remember the first day we were in there that we were officially like the owners, you know, turned up there at 6 a.m, all pumped up,
ready to go,
vacuuming the floor, you know, trying to welcome customers in, standing out on the highway in a chicken suit or
cleaning the salt off the windows.
You know, just ready to go. The first day we sold one $2 block of wax.
Wow. For
the whole day.
That's what you call a 0 day. Yeah.
It is, yeah.
A 0 day.
And I went home to Mum and I was like, "Mum, I don't know if we've made the right decision here. I've just spent 8 hours sitting in a shop and
talking to... How many people came in that day, though?
You know, 50 people.
Yeah. Lots of groms.
Yeah, you know what it was like back in the day. People sitting bloody watching videos all afternoon down
pulling
the back.
Every single board off the rack.
Yeah.
Holding them. Yep.
Trying every shirt on. And she's like, "Oh, you know, go in for the second day. You know, just keep trying." The second day, same thing again. $2 blocks of wax.
Progress.
On the second day.
Progress.
So I came home again.
Probably not paying the rent, but progress.
She said, "Oh, well, you know, it's double up from the first day." Anyway, from that point, point forward, the rest is kind of history.
Yep.
It started growing, and yeah, mate, it was a baptism of fire for someone who was, you know, fresh out of uni, didn't know too much about business. Just drop straight in the deep end and sort of see how it goes.
Mate, so let's go back to your grassroots as a bodyboarder. Obviously, you came down here from the sunny coast. You're going to Broady Primary. How early did you get into bodyboarding, or was it a kind of surfing introduction in the ocean and then you segued, or what happened?
We not that early at all, actually.
Right.
I was in high school and I hung around with this group of guys, and we always was skateboarding.
Nice.
Loved skateboarding, like building our own ramps, you know, running amok, doing that sort of thing. And I went on one of these big overseas trips with my family for, you know, 2 months to Europe or something. Got back from that trip and I was like, oh, you know, boys, when are we going skateboarding, building another ramp? And they're like, oh, mate, we're bodyboarding now. And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, you know, you got to get this, you know, board and a set of flippers and stuff and get out there. So I think that the first few months I just had like probably everyone when they first started, set of actual like swim fins that
Yep.
you use in the pool, like the long ones. This old like PE waterlogged thing that, you know,
A banana.
big banana,
Yep.
big flexi thing. And just sort of went from there. Started enjoying it a bit more, you know, going out doing it every day.
So were you pretty confident in the ocean at that stage?
Yeah, I grew up sort of in the ocean with my dad. Like he was a lifeguard
Yep.
for a little bit. So I was pretty comfortable in the ocean. And sort of by that stage, I was already living up at Nobby's Beach just here. So I used to have this little rule that if there was enough of a wave where you could even do one spin, like a forward spin, go out.
Yep.
So pretty much used to just go out every day and have a bit of a crack and have a bit of fun.
Proper grom grovel stuff. Yep.
Full grom grovel. And then that sort of led into meeting the O'Sullivans and joined the North Burleigh Bodyboarding Club.
NBBC.
Yeah,
There wasn't an acronym.
No, back then people didn't run the big acronyms.
Yep.
Like the Gold Coast Booging Club was called Border South.
Yep. Which Richard Gray ran.
Gray, old legend, Richard was. So yeah, you had back in the day there, you had Border South, which is pretty much just run out of D-Bar.
Yep.
Every comp. And then you had North Burleigh Bodyboard Club, which is up sort of this way, which was for some weird reason, the shories just always seemed to be fun up this way. Every time they ran a comp, there seemed to be like a 3-foot shory that was fun. And what they used to do back in the day, instead of having, you know, your age divisions, they just have A, AA, and AAA.
Yeah. Yep. Border South had the same in the beginning as well.
And I can't remember which one was the best or which was the worst, but you just sort of work your way up.
I think AAA, wasn't it? The more A's, the better.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think so. So, just sort of floated on from there, mate.
So in NBBC, because we're just going to smash through the long name, were there any other kind of big name guys in that club at the time that went on to greater things? Like, and I'm referring to, I guess, some other guys that we've chatted to on the potty, like Joe, for example, who went to Miami High. They had the Rat Pack, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So what you have to remember is Joe and those guys are a fair bit younger than me.
Yeah, of course. Yep.
So the guys that were in North Burleigh back then were like Craig McElroy, the Petersons, Luke and Jeff Peterson,
right?
Kiowa, O'Sullivan, of course,
who is good. Still ripping.
Yeah,
I think he just got back from a trip to Cloud9.
Yep, still ripping. Sonny Brown.
No way.
Don't know if you remember that.
Yeah,
name.
I do.
He was like crazy bodybuilder guy now. And I'm probably going to miss a few here, which is a shame.
What about like Apsy and Eppo? Like obviously there was another shop down the road. Was that operating at that time?
No,
not yet.
No. So
right.
I guess we'll get to that. But yeah, I'm sure there were some other good guys in the North Burleigh Bodyboard Club back then. But those guys you saw all surf up at Stratty as well.
Yeah, gotcha.
And they're pretty tight with some of the OG kind of Stratty guys. Who, you know, you could probably run a whole podcast just on that little
Absolutely.
subculture up there if you wanted to.
Amazing.
But yeah, it was a cool time. Yeah, really, really nice crew of people. Then they used to run the QAB, Queensland State Titles, the QAB, which used to be massive. It was like a 2-day competition back in the day, the QAB. And I think once a year they'd run an event down at D-Bar called the Elita Body Bash.
No way.
Which was...
So I think that would have been just before my time.
Probably.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm probably going to get this wrong, but I think like Joel Taylor has won the Elita Body Bash before, and some of the old legends back in the day when every bodyboarder was wearing Elita wetsuits. Yeah.
Barney would have still been competing at that time, I'm sure.
And I think he was, yeah. Yeah.
Mate, so let's get to focus a little bit more on the shop again, because it became an institution and the history grew into something much larger. But before we get to that part of it, the Goldie had a really big era of bodyboarding, which was in that kind of early mid 2000s. And it kind of, I was lucky enough to be on the Gold Coast at that time. Mate, there were so many bodyboard shops, and I mean, bodyboarding was big. There were, almost at a time more bodyboarders out at places like D-Bar than stand-up guys. I mean, yeah, Epos obviously came along at some stage. They were set up in the old Burleigh Theatre Arcade. You had a launch pad in Surfers Paradise, like such a strange place to have a bodyboarding shop, but
yeah,
it seemed to work. That was it Clive?
Yeah, Clive and Evan.
Yeah.
Evan used to work up there.
So again, some of those OG Stratty guys.
Yeah.
I still have a board that I bought from Launchpad that Corey Oliver is actually restoring for me at the moment down in Sydney. Yep.
Yeah.
Held on to it. And then obviously a bit further down the track, BSC opened up in Cooley.
Yep.
Like, mate, obviously a sign of a healthy sport. How did you go in that era? Because it was very competitive.
Yeah. Mate, yeah, it was a really healthy time. And the other thing that, to put it into perspective, we're talking about a time before online selling. So
it was just starting
to come in. And BSC and Epos were two of the sort of pioneers of that side of things. So in this day and age, there's no way that 3 or 4 bodyboard shops could exist in one city.
Not a chance.
But back then, if you wanted any of the boards, any of the gear, you had to go into a shop.
Yeah.
So I don't think anyone was making millions out of it. Put it that way. But you had 3 or 4 owner operated shops, which were paying pretty cheap rent, and pulling enough cash out of the shop to live a lifestyle and surf and
put some money into team riders.
Yeah. Oh, exactly, mate. And that's exactly what we did. Like I'm sure if I looked back at the books now and tried to reconcile how much money we made out of it, it'd be a minuscule amount. Yep. Because to maintain your name in the industry and to keep it going, you had to be putting it into team riders. I was down every weekend setting up stuff for competitions, doing school events.
I made it running 7 days a week.
Oh, exactly. And I'm sure we'll get to this in sometime in the podcast, but I'd got to a stage where I'd be spending my whole weekend, running competitions, setting up bloody tents, doing that sort of thing.
Well, you and I were both doing so much stuff with state titles, with club events. Yeah. It was non-stop.
Exactly. Where you just look at yourself and you say, where's all this going? Is this, am I improving, or am I just doing this to maintain, exactly where we're at?
Yeah. And that's a tricky one, because probably at that time we thought we were doing the right thing and it was getting bigger and better. But in hindsight, it was probably just
for sure.
Yep.
And that was, if we're being really honest, that was part of the problem, is because it's such a small group of people. And because the pie was so small that everyone was competing with, it naturally forced you to run into conflict with people that were your friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I know when Eppo's actually opened up before I owned Inverted.
Yep.
And I know the O'Sullivans would have been upset about that because
It was so close.
so close, a kilometre up the road, and
In a prominent building as well.
exactly. And before that, I think Eppo was just running his sort of little online store, and he used to come into Inverted all the time and get excess stock.
Yep.
If he had an order for something that he didn't have, he'd come and go, I need a pair of medium large Churchills or whatever. Yep. And they'd just give it to him and he'd replenish it like a week later.
Yeah. You wouldn't get that now.
And then, he had to come in and tell them one day, oh, guys, I'm opening up, a kilometre away from you. So that was the unfortunate thing about it, that it was competitive, but it was such a small pie and marketplace that it just led people to get into conflict with each other. And it was the same for me.
Yeah.
Like I ran into big conflicts with people, including some people that are, now my best friends.
Yeah, I mean, look at you and me. Like I did a few little things for you at Inverted, which, mate, I can't thank you enough. To me, that was the greatest thing I'd ever done at that age, was just spending days at one of the biggest and most recognised bodyboard shops in the world, hanging out.
Yeah.
Wearing like extra small T-shirts because that was a thing back then.
Mate, tight and bright.
Oh, Jesus.
That's the way it had to be.
But then obviously I went on to BSC.
Yeah.
And, both you and Mick are still to this day some of my closest friends. But even then, it felt really awkward for our friendship because, I wanted to be successful working for Mick and to build his business. But that also meant being really competitive from a marketing point of view with you.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
And Eppo.
Tough. Oh, mate, and I remember you and I had a few phone calls. Like when you'd first moved over and worked for BSC, when I was like, fuck, Benny, what's going on? Because what happened was when you had Inverted, Eppos, and Launchpad, they're just sort of mum and dad shops.
Yep.
Just ticking along.
Yeah.
No one's not sort of hyper competitive. And basically what happened, you had a store that was a big business like BSC.
It was an institution.
It was an institution. Yep. He had his business model running really well. And he identified the Gold Coast as a good area to come and open up. And I think
especially at that southern end as well.
Definitely. And he basically gave everyone notice and said, I'm coming in. Get ready. Do what you need to do to protect your own business because I'm going to come in and have a crack.
Yeah. Oh, mate, he was savvy.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And that's the way the world works, isn't it? That's why we live in a market economy, in a democracy where if you want to go and challenge someone in business, you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was, and that's what I'm talking about, is that unfortunately it still is to this day, it's just such a small pie that led to people getting into silly disputes which probably weren't necessary.
Yeah, definitely. But there was also the I guess the internal brand wars as well, because you had all the reps, looking after certain other shops because they were getting bigger indents.
Yeah.
So it might not look after the smaller one, might not give them anything.
For sure.
Yeah.
Oh, mate, and we had Inverted. We had a war with like Barney and the world.
Yeah, with world
guys.
Bodyboards. Yep.
For years we went to war against those guys because for whatever reason they just refused to supply our shops, and I lost sleep over that. I used to get so personally upset about it because I'd go into these stinky backwater shithouse surf shops that had all the World Bodyboard stuff in there down the back of their shop gathering dust.
Yep.
Got some acne covered punk kid that doesn't give a shit about it. And they're supplying them. And then you've got a core store
here absolutely.
On the Gold Coast that's selling bodyboard stuff, but you
can't get it.
Can't get it. We during that time we tried everything to try and get it. In personal phone calls, conversations, meetings, everything we could do. Just couldn't get it across the line.
I do believe at one period, mate, I may or may not have been shifting some stock from a large surf retailer, not to be named, from their shelves into the shop.
Yeah, for sure. Mate, we found a way. We
Found a loophole.
I remember when I don't know why they were doing it, but Amart All Sports started, they wanted to move all their Churchill fin stocks. And that was, Churchill fins were part of the world brand.
Yeah.
So I grabbed a van and rang every Amart All Sports from here to like Coffs Harbour.
And said, let me at it.
Bought them out of medium, large and large Churchills and brought them all into our shop.
There's a movie in that.
Yeah.
There's a movie in that.
Mate, there is. So, all that sort of stuff was going on.
In saying that, though, I mean, location. You were smack bang in the middle, Gold Coast Highway, huge traffic going past every day. On top of that, you were a stone's throw from one of the biggest surf media offices known to man in Morrison Media, which was also the office of Riptide. Did you see that as a benefit for your business? Because there was so many people coming in the doors of Morrison Media. Did you see that kind of stifle over to your shop? Or did it assist you in creating relationships?
A little bit. We had a really good relationship with the Riptide guys.
Yep.
Like when Riptide was sort of booming.
Who was at the helm then? Was it Nor?
Nor then into Heavy.
Heavy.
And I've forgotten who was before Nor, but I'm probably going to get in trouble for forgetting that. But yeah, pretty much Nor into Heavy. I suppose it benefited us a little bit because they'd drop over and come and say hello and stuff. But back in those days, Riptide was just part of a big corporate brand.
Sure was.
So no matter how much handshaking and back slapping kind of thing you're doing, unless you're putting in the advertising dollars.
Yeah, big dollars too.
You're not getting.
Yeah.
And we, especially at the start, we weren't a big consumer of advertising.
Yep.
Because we only had the one or two shops. So, the other shops and brands putting in double pages and stuff. And yeah, we couldn't afford that.
Sometimes like 4 pages. They'd have 2 double spreads back to back.
Yeah, for sure. And you have to remember as well, at that time, that's when Movement came out.
Yep. So double the marketing spend.
Yeah.
Yep.
And started being pretty competitive about sort of which one you'd advertise in and
which one was going to generate more revenue return for your business.
Correct. Yeah. And it was an interesting demographic about who read which magazine as well.
Definitely.
You had more of the like core cool guys would read Movement, but Riptide had the numbers.
Of course it did.
Because it had the distribution network, it had the everything else. So so to answer your question, I guess it assisted a little bit, but if I just run on my gut feeling, you sort of feel like they could have done more for smaller shops.
Yep. Mate, let's talk about I guess some of the guys that you supported through the shop, like your team riders. Like some of the earliest guys I remember are the Rigby's. You had Scott and Tom. What's the middle?
Ash.
I think you were even kind of backing him as a filmer for a period of time.
Yeah.
But I mean, Tom was 10, 11, 12 when you started supporting him?
Yeah. Yeah. And they used to live around the corner from me, just up at Nobby's there with their mum was a legend, Susie.
Oh, God bless.
Yeah, they had a house up there, just full, like drop-in centre, 3 young boys. I think they just had a downstairs area where you could just run in and sleep on the couch, and all sorts of shenanigans were happening there.
I think the Rigby's place was the second home for a lot of people.
Yeah, oh, it definitely was. And we like Scott was always the elder statesman and sort of the legend. And ripped back in his day too. Like really unique style of bodyboarding, really sort of tight lines, charged. But we sort of identified Tom from a really young age that he was going to be good.
Yep.
Which turned out to be true.
Yeah, definitely.
When Mike took him under his wing. And mate, I'll still remember to my dying day when Tom made that final of the pipe contest.
Yep.
And I'm not sure if anyone's spoken to you about this on the podcast before,
Not yet.
but that infamous year when it was just right at the tail end of when like heaps of Aussies used to go to Hawaii
And spend the whole season,
shave their heads, ride around on shitty BMX bikes, spend the whole season there in Hawaii. And Tom had just been ripping the whole contest. And I was at home and it was early in the morning and they said, oh, Rigby's like made the final of the pipe contest. So we got about 20 guys and ran down to the Nobby Surf Club and forced them to put it on there on the big screen and started getting on the beers. Like
Definitely wouldn't have been in 4K back then, mate.
Nah. Oh, mate, it was in
Low res.
Low res.
What
is it? RCG or whatever. It was even before it was even 2K.
Yeah, mate, before HDMI, they were running the red, yellow and white plugs into the TV.
So yeah, that final where he was, I think he had everyone else comboed, and he just made that one silly mistake and sort of let Hub, he let Hub go one, I think one under his priority, and Hub got like a nice barrel and did an invert and maybe got a 7 or something. And then that meant Hub was no longer comboed. And I think he needed like an 8 or something to win from there. And then Rigby got a shitty one and Hub was out in priority. And of course, the wave comes.
And it's Hub.
Yep.
At home.
At Pipe.
Yep.
So yeah, that was a crazy moment in the sport. Like you imagine now thinking about Tom Rigby winning a pipe contest. Like it was just such a dream run.
Oh, absolutely.
And mate, the other thing is it would have been so well deserved for him because you know him well also.
Yeah.
He's such a genuine, humble kid.
And he was really determined to get better at his craft.
Yeah.
He just stuck to it. And I think a lot of that had to do with his mum. Yeah, Susie wasn't a coach, but she was just that supportive mum that wanted him to be happy in what he did.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
We're going to get back to some competitive stuff as well, mate, but a lot of big things then happen with the business. First of all, you made a conscious decision to franchise the business. Like, love to know what led to that. But then a little bit further down the track, you obviously then sold the business. Yeah, to obviously a really close friend of both of ours, Ben Wells. Mate, run us through that, like the timeline, the period, what was going on? Yeah,
well, I'm going to, the memory's a bit sketchy of exactly what happened, but...
You are 40 now.
Yeah, exactly, mate. But yeah, basically the business started going, pumping along, and the first inquiry we had was someone from the Sunshine Coast that sort of came along to us and just said, oh, we want to sort of replicate what you're doing here on the Gold Coast.
And that wasn't Wellesley?
Wasn't Wellesley.
Right.
There was another guy called Dan who sort of wanted to replicate inverted up there.
Yep.
And we're talking about the best way to do it, and I just finished sort of law school, and I think one of the last subjects I did was franchising. So for whatever reason, I got it into...
Good case study.
Yeah. I got it into my mind that I was just like, I don't have the cash to do it. So, if you just pay us X, we'll franchise the brand to you and you can open up your own store.
Yep.
So he did that, and that one seemed to work okay. And then
so this guy opened an inverted on the sunny coast.
Opened an inverted on the Sunshine Coast. So it wasn't
Wellesley that opened the first one? No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's another guy named Dan.
Dan? And
it wasn't, I don't know if you know where the inverted is now up there. It was actually in a different location.
Yeah, I knew that.
It was across the road.
Yep.
So yeah, that all seemed to work pretty well. And I was like, oh, this franchise thing's, pretty good. Like, it's a good way to sort of get the brand name going and, not have to outlay the hundreds of thousands of dollars to go and fit out a new store.
Yeah, of course.
And, so then the Byron Bay guys came to us.
Frank and Kay, yep.
Yep. And
great people.
Legends.
Yep.
And their son Ben, who used to rip on the boog as well.
And then he kind of segued into motocross, didn't he?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
So they came to us. We helped them with their Byron Bay store. Then we opened one in Port Stephens, down that way.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Down that way.
You were big.
Yeah.
You were like City Beach.
And and then the Brisbane one.
Yep.
In Albany Creek.
Yeah.
Was
crazy.
Was the fifth one.
Yeah.
So that's when we were sort of at the peak of our powers.
Of the dynasty.
You'd probably call it. And we were pumping out heaps of our own gear. We're doing our own fins, boards.
You had boards at the time. Who was making your boards?
Ed.
Yeah.
Glenn Edwards.
Yep. Another guy that we fully anticipate to get onto the potty.
I think he'd be great.
Yep.
Yeah. And I can't remember whether we ever got any done overseas, but I think we just used to get Ed to make them.
Yeah, and he was at the kind of Burleigh industrial estate, wasn't he? Yep.
He was out the back there and used to just, have a couple of beers and pump them out.
Just keep to himself.
Yeah,
he's a quiet man.
So that's when it was all at sort of the peak of its powers. But from that point, what we didn't envisage is that as well as us having to own an actual store, we're also going to have to manage all of these franchises.
Yeah, of course. Because they have to meet expectations and guidelines of the core business.
Correct.
Yep.
And sort of as part of the franchising model, everyone had to contribute equally to advertising.
Of course. Which becomes tricky.
Correct.
Yep.
So it became, like a democratic process where you have different people trying to pull the business in all sorts of different directions. And you've got, and I think that was at about the same time when Ben Wells took over the Sunshine Coast store.
Who had the Brizzy store?
Mate, I can't remember their name.
That's all right.
Yeah. I'll remember it. I'll remember it. Sorry.
Back to Wellesley.
Mind. Okay,
That's
so
right.
anyway.
Sunny Coast, Wellesley.
Wellesley had just taken over the Sunny Coast store. As we know, massive go-getter, had some really good ideas for the brand.
So driven.
Super driven, had lots of things to do. And a lot of the other owners were what you'd probably just call like mum and dad, small business owners.
Well, Frank and Kay were the mum and dad.
Yeah, and all credit to them, just cool grassroots people who just wanted to run their little store.
And support their kids.
Support their kids, support their local bodyboarding shop. And that's one of the funniest things about this whole inverted, thing is that most of the people that opened these stores were doing it for their kids.
Yeah. Well, look at the wall use. Took over from Eppo's.
Exactly. And the other funny thing is all of them went the same way. The kids lose fucking interest.
Yep.
And the parents end up running the stores.
Yep.
And that's what happened with 2 or 3 of our franchises. And then you had the motivated franchisees that are wanting to advertise and sort of smash along with the business.
Build their wealth.
And
build their business.
They started pulling apart. So we had, we're constantly having to have meetings to sort out, advertising plans and what we're doing next year and everything.
And how was that done back in the day? Was it early days Skype?
Mate, it was sit down. All drive to a location.
Central place.
Sit down and do it.
God.
Yeah, that was, I don't even know if Skype was, we're talking like 2005 or something.
MSN.
MSN or AOL even.
Yeah, Jesus.
So it sort of got to a stage where I can remember it pretty clearly coming into the Burleigh shop one day and just going, I'm just so sick of putting out spot fires and dealing with all this like political stuff.
Yeah. Clash of personalities.
Clash of personalities. And I was like, it's actually making me resent the sport that I love. Because every time I thought about bodyboarding, I just thought about, oh, fuck, what are we doing with this advertising here? Or, what do we have to do there? And I was like, this isn't good. This isn't leading in the right direction. So that's when I sort of made the decision that I was going to, I sold the Gold Coast shop. And still just retained the brand name.
What was the guy that bought the Goldie store then? We'll come back
to it. And
he eventually shifted over the road,
he did.
Correct? Yep.
Yeah, he did.
Right.
So I sold the Goldie shop and not too long after that ended up selling the whole trademark and brand name and everything.
Yep.
Because it was just getting to a stage where, I didn't want to keep managing the infighting,
of course,
or the political issues, and it was making me resent, the sport that I loved. And I was like, that's enough for me.
So
I've taken this as far as I can.
Did you approach Wellesley, or did he approach you?
I think I approached him. Yeah, and he had some cool ideas for the brand. And the proof's in the pudding.
I mean,
look at him now.
He's had it for well over a decade.
Yeah.
Obviously got 2 shops, a really, really successful online store.
Yeah.
He ended up buying, I think, bodyboardshop.com website, which was Eppo's.
Correct.
Evidently took over BSC shop space in Cooley. I don't want to say that he controls the market, but basically he's got Queensland wrapped up in a nice little basket. And still to this day, he is one of the most passionate guys I know in the sport.
Yeah.
Sometimes too passionate, but similar to me.
Yeah.
Love chatting with him, love working on projects with him, and
for sure.
I'm actually catching up with him in the morning to have a chat.
Great. And salt of the earth guy, legend. And the most impressive thing is, ever since he bought Inverted, a few of my harebrained ideas that I've gone out and done, such as this tour to South Africa, a few other things, he's always supported me, which is just so nice. Absolute legend.
Well, that sounds like a perfect segue, Danny, because it's on our list of things to talk about.
Yep.
One of the most infamous bodyboarding tour film projects that I can remember is the brainchild of you and Wellesley, the Aussie Buccaneers tour. So, harebrained scheme to head to South Africa. How did this come about? For anyone that hasn't seen it, jump online. It's still up there.
Yeah.
We probably didn't get great waves for the whole trip, but got some good stuff. Lots of other crazy stuff went down. Fill us in.
Mate, it was it was spawned by I met the South African sort of captain guy named Clinton Millard.
Yep.
I met him in Chile at an event over there.
And you're still chatting with him today, right?
Still chatting with
beautiful.
him today. And been chatting to him about how cool sort of teams events were and stuff. And he said to me, he was like, mate, we don't need these ISA World Games. Let's put our own teams event on. And I was like, well, can you bring some of the guys over to Australia? And he was like, oh, mate, it's probably way too expensive. And I said, well, I'll bring some over to South Africa and let's do a bit of a tour over there. I've always wanted to come over there. And originally I thought, I might get 4 or 5 guys to go over.
Had you sold Inverted at that stage?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I had.
Yep.
I was actually working as a lawyer.
Yep. Gotcha.
At that stage. Which was interesting because the firm that I was working at, I was spending so much time
on this project,
organising this thing. So I had to tell them it was like a charity project.
Technically it was. You didn't make any money.
I didn't make any money. I think I had to pay for a few guys' flight tickets. But had to tell them it was a charity project. And then tell them that I was the chef de mission for the project, which is, like when an Australian team goes to Commonwealth Games, sort of the leader.
Yep.
That's their weird name. So, he and I made up this idea that we'd come over and do this couple of bodyboarding comps against South Africa. And originally it was only going to be 4 or 5 guys. I think we ended up taking like 12 or 14.
Yep.
Including a few guys that were under 18.
Yep. One of the Cassidy boys, I think.
Yep. Simon.
Yeah, Simon Cassidy. Yep.
Liam Lucas.
Yep.
Cramsey was probably only
he would have been
20,
on the cusp. Yeah,
maybe.
You had Nicky G,
Novi.
Yep.
Jake Stone. We had Azza Dropning.
Glossop.
Azza Glossop. Yep. Who else did we have? I'm going to miss some here, which is a shame. Me and Wellesley.
Yep, you and Wellesley were there.
Simon Cassidy. I said Cramsey already.
Yep.
And whoever. Elliot
Williams was there. Yes, he was.
There was probably a few others that I've missed, but we ended up putting together a pretty stacked team.
It's kind of like almost an inverted team, though, wasn't it? Yep.
Yeah, it's a pretty stacked team. And the main ones we're stoked to get was, of course, Gornell.
Yep.
Novi and Jake.
Those guys were at their peak
at
that time. Yep.
Absolute peak. So we got over there. Unfortunately, kind of got skunked with waves.
I think your first few days you got waves, right?
We got some fun waves in Cape Town.
Yep.
But then it sort of went a little bit downhill from there. And then as part of the trip, it was meant to be sort of like a free surfing trip, but there was one competition in this little town in South Africa called Port Alfred.
Yep.
Which, if people don't know, it's sort of like the closest I would call it to is like a South Wall Ballina.
Right.
Kind of wave. It's like a left.
But probably even sharkier than South Wall Ballina.
Sharkier, and the wave's pretty average too.
Yep.
So we're like, okay, boys, the formalities of the trip, because this Port Alfred town had kind of sponsored the whole trip.
Yep.
They'd organised.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, mate, they'd paid for all our food the whole time we're in South Africa.
You had a bit of a mansion, didn't you? You stayed at?
Stayed in a beautiful hotel, 3 big like GM 4-wheel drives. So I said to the boys, this is just the formality we have to do these couple of days in Port Alfred. Let's get this comp out of the way.
Was it Kogelby? Was that the name of the Kogelby?
I think that's part of it, yeah. So funny story. So it's a 2-day competition and against South Africa. And they had all their guys there, like Tristan Roberts.
Jared.
They didn't have Jared.
They
had everyone but Jared. Ian Campbell. So 2 world champions.
Who is their DK guy?
A guy called June Barker.
June Barker, right.
And he's good. He's really good. I still follow him on social media. He's good. So day 1, we smoked him. Like Jake was ripping, Novi absolutely tearing, smoked him on day 1. And the boys were like super serious and into it. And then so that night, there was a pub sort of just behind the beach.
Right.
And some of the South African guys were like, let's come and have a beer after, it's been a big day of competition, blah,
they
blah, blah.
stitched you up.
Next thing, they're buying the boys tequila shots,
right.
It's a Saturday night too. So ended up a massive night in this Port Alfred town. So I've woken up the next morning like a bit dusty still, bit dusty Martin, and the phone's going off from this Clinton Millard guy, like, mate, come down, like
it's on.
The comp's just about to start. The waves are good, Got in the car, drove down, and it was still really early in the morning, and I saw like 3 of our guys down the beach. I'm not going to name who they are, but three of our guys down the beach, and I'm like, oh, how good's this? The boys are keen. Like they're down.
They hadn't been home.
I saw them down the beach, just sitting there watching the surf. And I'm like,
Jesus.
They're down nice and early. Then I saw one of them tipping up a beer, and I'm like, oh God. So, mate. So, cut a long story short, we had most of our guys were surfing super hungover or drunk on the second day,
leveling the scorecard,
and we got annihilated on the second day, and South Africa ended up just pipping us at the post.
Yeah, right.
Which it was a good story for them,
of course.
But yeah,
because it's at the end of the day, mate, it's not really about who wins that.
No, exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing. It was a good sort of cultural catch up with everyone, and everywhere we were going, like all the local community of bodyboarders was coming out, and we went to one beach in Cape Town, and the whole of the Cape Town Bodyboard Club turned up. 100 guys. Well, I mean, just wanting to surf with like Novi, and
that's what I mean. To see those guys in their hometown, that's huge. That's huge, which is very polarizing to where we are on the Gold Coast, right? Like, I was here for 13 years. You still live here. I was here during an era when there was a plethora of guys that were at the top of their game. For me, even though I was living here and surfing every day, was the same feeling. Like I remember when Hardy came over and lived on the Gold Coast for a couple of years.
Oh yeah.
And then I'd go out for a Dawny at D-Bar and there's Hardy.
Yeah.
Even though I have a really good kind of relationship with him now and he's a good friend, but just starstruck, right, by seeing those guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's exactly what it was like over there. Like when, especially the big three sort of guys like Jake, Gornell, and Novi turning up. These young kids were just absolutely frothing. Yeah. And that was so cool to see. And probably the highlight of the trip was we got, of the whole of the South African coastline, we got Jeffreys Bay pumping.
No way.
One day. And
wow.
So we arrived there sort of in the afternoon one day, and it was huge and stormy, big 10-foot lines rolling through. And, no one's even surfing. It's cold.
And daunting.
Yep. And sharky.
Yep.
And a bit of a write-off, we'll all sleep in. And the next morning we woke up and it was still big, but there was just the odd one sort of starting to grip on that inside. And cleaning up. So I think me and Gornell were the first to paddle out, and then it just started going absolutely nuts, pumping. And
super fast wave for bodyboarding.
Oh, it is.
Yep.
Yeah, it is. But some of the guys got really good ones. And I think there's one little clip of Gornell. This one barrel he got was insane.
Just behind the curtain for a long time.
Oh, yeah. But the surfers, the local surfers there got so, butthurt.
Oh, I bet they did.
About it was really weird, actually. I remember because Ian Campbell was still there with us. And
which helps.
Yeah. But he paddled over to us in the water and he was like, "Oh, boys, we're going to have to think about sort of going in soon." And we're like, "What?" He's like, yeah, some of the local guys are getting a bit upset. Mate, come on.
It's one day of the year, right?
Yeah.
Standard.
So that was a bit of an interesting thing.
All right, mate, we're going to go on to a different topic now on a bigger scale. Administrative bodyboarding. You've played a big part in the success of the World Tour over the years. A highly recognised judge, head judge at some World Tour events as well. You've seen the best part of the world and some of the greatest bodyboarders competing at some of the most incredible and challenging waves. We talked a bit about this earlier today. Arica, Fronton. Mate, give us a rundown. How did you get to that World Tour status? I mean, everyone that competes at club level ends up spending some time on the judging table. I guess guys that are less competitive probably do a little bit more, go and get their accreditation, do state titles, make a bit of money to cover their cost to go there. And then those guys that are really passionate kind of push that and go to nationals, and from nationals to World Tour.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, mate, pretty sort of interesting little background. So I was just the same as anyone else, used to just help out at the club contests and everything.
Pen and paper, mate, flag system,
tabulated all up at the end of the heat, all the fun stuff.
You had 30 seconds to tabulate scores before the next heat.
Yeah. And there used to be this women's booging contest on the Gold Coast.
Yep.
I've forgotten the name of a developer. For whatever reason, some developer took a like to women's bodyboarding.
Right.
Could have been a number of reasons.
Mm.
And he used to have the contest right in the front of Surfers Paradise.
Oh,
so he could get his sign up and everything.
Of course. Get the audience.
Yeah. And when that event was running, I'm pretty sure he paid for it for Carl Gohl.
Yep.
Who's one of the old legend,
OGs.
OG legend judges from Australia, along with Craig Haddon, Maurice, Wakeling. So Carl Gohl came up and offered to run a judging course. And as part of the course, you do the course and then you get paid to judge this women's comp.
Was this under the Bio Limited banner at this stage?
No, mate. That
before it set up?
A long time before that was set up. So Carl Gohl came up to the Gold Coast, ran, it was called your level 0 or level 1 judging course. And then, so a few of us stayed on and judged the competition, and ended up being myself, a guy, Gareth Goodsurf.
Yes, Gaz.
Who, a lot of people would know from around the traps, legend.
Is he still on the Goldie?
He's still on the Goldie.
Shout out to Gaz.
Yeah, I see him all the time, and he'll probably be listening to this too. He's absolute legend. Trent Standen, another old school guy, and another Gavin Martin, sort of stratty guys.
Trent was big into like triathlons and stuff, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. So Carl Gold came up and ran that course. We judged for the couple of days. And I think after that, Carl said, a few of you guys are pretty good. If you want to come and start helping us on the Aussie tour.
Aussie tour, yep.
You can. So I think it was just myself and Trent, maybe Gaz, started helping with a few little events here and there. And then I got a call up at about 7 o'clock at night, one night, and it was either Carl Goal or Craig Haddon who said, mate, we've got an opening for you to judge the Shark Island trials if you can get down to Cronulla by tomorrow.
It's
this
7
is 7
o'clock
p.m. at night. So jumped on, looked at flights, like, $1,500 last minute kind of flight. So I grabbed Corey McLean, put him in the car, and we drove down.
No way.
Did an all-nighter down to Cronulla for the Shark Island trials. And I think Corey made the final or something. And it sort of just kicked off from there, mate. Then just started doing more and more Aussie tour events.
How was the Shark Island event that year, by the way? Can you recall?
I can't recall.
And what year do you think that was?
Would have been like around the 2000 and...
It wasn't the infamous 2001, though.
No, it was way after that. 2007, 2008 kind of time. So, started doing heaps of stuff on the Aussie tour. And then everyone will remember when there's a big injection of cash into the World Tour and the IBA kicked off. And I just sort of happened to be in the right place at the right time then, because I was one of the only sort of young single guys that could pack up everything and go and judge and,
of course,
and do stuff. So, mate, they used to, at the start of the year, just send you a list and say, like,
as a calendar,
which comps do you want to come to? Like Pipe, Puerto Rico, Arica, Brazil, and you just tick the list.
A bachelor's dream.
Oh, mate, it was out of control. I remember some of the trips used to end up being like, 10 or 12 weeks away because you'd just be
joking.
hopscotching kind of between events. But mate, the memories from those years were so cool. You were just hanging out with guys that you really looked up to and enjoyed.
Tezza was a big part of the World Tour at that stage, wasn't he? Yep.
I think Tezza was like he was the technical director.
Yep.
That they sort of called him, so he ran the comps basically.
Kind of like an operations manager.
Sort of like an operations manager.
And always did a pretty good job, mate.
Really good job. I've learnt so much from Tezza.
I think everyone that's done something in bodyboarding learned something from Tez.
And mate, to be honest, I've learned a lot that I can apply to my job at the moment. In the law field, like the sort of spot fires and arguments that I've seen Tezza put out diplomatically have been amazing. I've never seen someone that has such a sense of like when to push hard and when to pull back.
Yeah, right.
I've seen him, be approached by like 20 crazily angry women about prize money. I've seen him be approached by guys coming up who've just lost a heat that means they're going to lose the World Tour. And the way he handles people.
Yep.
Really impressive skill that I even today when I'm, handling disputes in law for multi-million dollars, try and use those same skills.
Yeah.
So they were some awesome times, man. Going around the world judging comps, and I think the thing, everyone knew that it was sort of unsustainable. I think there were probably, 4 or 5 guys at the top that had these sort of pipe dreams that they could really monetize bodyboarding and start, I don't know how they thought they were going to pay for it long term, make little clips and sell them as mobile phone screen papers or something. And again,
this was before YouTube or influencers, so options were pretty limited. I know at that stage there were a few guys that went out and actually got sports managers, so they kind of helped them get a little bit more backing to make it sustainable financially to travel the world. I know Pierre was one of those. Winnie had a manager at the time. I think, did BP?
Probably.
BP?
Yeah. Well, there was some pretty serious money starting to go into it.
Yeah.
And it looked like it was about to really sort of rocket off. But, I don't know if other people could see, but I could sort of see that this was something that wasn't sustainable, that big cash had been injected by investors. And it was going to be something that would tick along for a few years until the money ran out.
Yep. Well, I think, there were many people that saw the writing on the wall. I know Tezza did a podcast with Riptide a while back and spoke about it in detail, that he could see it coming and that he brought it to the attention of others, but it was kind of just ignored, unfortunately, at the time.
And that's when looking back on that, I still think that the hangover of the lack of Aussies competing on the World Tour is still from that IBA experience.
Oh, definitely.
And the reason is because you had a generation that were on tour, all the best Aussies, like, Ben, Ryan, Mitch, Winnie, all
Hardy.
Those guys, all those guys. And you had this next generation pushing so hard to get there. Guys like, Chase O'Leary, Joe, all those guys, just Lockie right at the cusp. And they were spending money traveling, trying to qualify,
trying to get experience,
trying to do all that. And then the thing just evaporated.
It collapsed.
It did. Collapsed, evaporated, whatever we want to call it. And unfortunately, those guys were the ones that were sort of left holding the candle, that never made any prize money out of it, spent every dollar they owned chasing the tour, and, couldn't even survive off their sponsorship.
Yep.
Had to go and get a second job.
And that, again, was also around a period of time where the economy wasn't great.
Yeah.
So those sponsorship contracts for riders, they were kind of 4 times the amount a few years prior, and they'd really dropped down.
Yeah.
Which leads me to another really good question, mate. How do you see bodyboarding now from an economical perspective, and particularly in line with the current World Tour? Look, I'm very passionate about the sport. I've given my opinion many times on the podcast with a number of guests. Yes, I'm critical, but I'm trying to be supportive at the same time.
Yeah.
But what's your take?
Well, the first thing I'll say is that I don't follow it that closely anymore. Like, I just...
unfortunately, not a lot of people do.
Yeah, exactly. But the things that I've learned, from the inverted days, from the judging days, from everything else, is that it's a tiny sport.
It's a niche within a niche.
It's a tiny niche within the surfing niche. And, you've got a sport like shortboard surfing that isn't even financially stable enough to sustain itself.
No, well, they got Dirk Ziff.
Dirk Ziff has to plunge in
bankrolling it
10 million, 15 million a year to keep surfing afloat. So I don't think bodyboarding can ever expect to be financially viable. I don't think people can ever expect to make a proper career out of it, where they're going to make money. I actually truly think that the only thing that can make bodyboarding, a sport in the newspapers is finding our own Dirk Ziff kind of guy. And where we're going to find that are people that bodyboarded when they're younger and have now grown up and run successful businesses. So the only thing that's going to save bodyboarding and create a cool tour or create a cool sort of Aussie tour around this country are successful professional bodyboarders that are willing to throw some money and not expect a financial return from it, because it's too small a sport to get any financial return.
Yeah, of course.
And especially in this day and age where we've run into the social media thing, where if you want to spend 10 grand on advertising, you can plunge it straight into Facebook and tweak exactly who's going to see your ads.
Yeah.
So, and you might be able to get 100,000 page views for 10 grand, let's say. So why would any business in its right mind ever spend 10 grand on a bodyboarding competition when there's going to be a couple of hundred people watching a webcast? At best.
I mean, at the peak of the ABA, when we had significant events at really good wave locations.
Yeah.
We spoke about this before, D-Bar. Like firing D-Bar, it was basically a world tour event. We had the hubs there, we had the players there, we had Mitch, we had Ryan, we had Jake, Joe, Ash, the works, right?
Yeah.
And we had a really, really good production. Like Jennings was working with a whole film crew.
Yeah.
We reviewed our data at the end of that event. In the final, so the biggest event of the whole kind of thing, we had like 40 people watching.
Yeah.
40 people.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Mate, and that's the problem right there. And it's weird because we're in our own little microcosm because we've got lots of friends that are bodyboarders and, we jump on your Facebook feed or Instagram feed and you're getting...
And the algorithms
showing you wee bodyboard videos, so you think, oh, look at all this stuff going on. But you have a look at the actual numbers of people that do it. It's minute.
Yeah. It's
tiny.
Yeah.
So that's my first point, is that I don't think it's ever going to be a financially viable sport to run a world tour. The only way it can happen is if there's some sort of angel investor, you might call it, who's going to come along, like if you and I were ever millionaires.
Yep.
And we said, we just love bodyboarding so much, I'm going to chuck $100,000 a year into it. So I can go to these cool comps, hang with my mates, get a bit of community feel out of it.
Well, I think we've kind of done that, but just not at the $100,000 level.
Yep. Exactly. So that's the first point. The second point is, now that surfing is in the Olympics, I think there'd be a lot of bodyboarders that would say, I don't want it to go that way. I think a lot of them are happy for it to be a small niche sport in our own little style of waves, our own little subculture. That's one thing now, is surfing going so much into the mainstream and in the Olympics. More and more of that subculture and kind of, mongrelly original elements going to get massaged out of it.
Well, surfing is very corporate now.
Correct.
And it's very, it is a professional sport, but it is the epitome of professional. The top 10 guys in the world are athletes. If you go back to the early 2000s, the 90s, the 80s, the top 10 were not athletes.
Yeah.
They were rock stars.
Correct.
And they had a life of rock star.
Yeah.
You can't do that anymore.
No. And that's the thing. Like I think if you sat most bodyboarders down, they'd say, we don't want it going in that direction. Like that, what it needs to do is what it's always done, is, find something a bit different, a bit weird, and go in that direction rather than following, in the footsteps of this big competition kind of model. So that's where I think it's going. I still love supporting the tour and supporting the local clubs, and everything, because, young kids get so much out of all that. But I think at the top level, and just watching the IBC stuff, the only way those comps survive is because of big grants from the local councils and cities that put the events on.
Or again, a very local Dirksif.
Correct.
Yep.
So
again, talking about the future and developments in the sport, obviously materials haven't really changed over 30 years, but we're now in an era of wave pools. You and I have surfed together at Urban Surf. Basically, most guys at Bodyboard now have spent time in a wave pool, but you've also surfed up in Yeppoon at Surf Lakes, which is a bit of a rarity. Not many people have had that opportunity. Can you give me a bit of a rundown of that, and how did you get involved?
Yeah, so I was actually an early stage investor in that one. One of the founders sort of approached me through sort of business networks, and we got chatting and became an early stage investor in that concept. So I was invited up to one of their very early open days.
Wow.
And unfortunately, I was telling you earlier that the day before they'd been trying to crank up the plunger as hard as possible to see how big they could get it. And the bodyboarding slab kind of wave there, they call it the island, the lip got so heavy that it cracked the concrete under sort of exactly where the lip breaks. So by the day we got there, the concrete was all sticking up with Rio mesh and everything in the takeoff zone.
Death.
Oh, it was nuts. So didn't get to surf that. The other weird thing was because it had cracked the bottom, the whole lake was like brown. It was like a dam.
All the dirt came out.
And when you sort of paddled around, you feel the dirt on your board and everything.
How did that affect the other waves though? Because it's, there's a bit of backwash that comes off, right?
Yeah, a little bit, but they're sort of far enough apart that it doesn't. When you're there in real life, it's a super impressive thing to watch.
Yep. Bit Mad Maxy?
Super Mad Maxy. And the location with like the big hills in the background and everything. But when you see that big plunger going down, up and down, it's nuts.
So what wave did you get to surf when you were there?
I think they call it Ockie's Peak.
Right.
Which that's the one next to the slab. It's the second heaviest wave.
That's an A-frame.
Big A-frame.
Yep.
And so how it works is, for people that haven't watched it or don't know anything about it, that the plunger goes up and down 3 times. And so you get it's a 3-wave set.
Right.
And you have 6 people sitting out there.
Splitting peaks.
So
every wave is an A-frame. Even the island, when it was working, is an A-frame.
I think the island's just a right.
Right.
But all the others are A-frames.
Okay.
And so, big 3-wave set. And then the plunger stops for 2 minutes and
levels out,
lets the pool reset, and you paddle back out.
Right. How many guys did they kind of have in the pool at one time on each wave?
Probably about 10.
Okay.
So you'd only sort of have to wait one set, and then it was your chance to go. And that's the beauty of the surf lakes concept compared to some of the other wave pools, that you can have like 20 people in the water at a time, all catching waves.
And all getting different waves. Do they rotate in the pool during the session?
If you want to.
Yeah, great.
Basically how it works, from the most advanced waves around to sort of the easiest waves.
Yep.
And sort of all the way around the corner, it's just like a soft little longboarding wave, basically just a whitewash.
So for people to learn to surf.
Yeah.
So there is a viable, sustainable kind of business plan with that model.
There is. It's still a difficult model to run. And the difficulty that I've sort of seen in it is that you need so many staff to run it.
From a safety
perspective, because you basically have to have 2 lifeguards in the water watching people go left and right.
Right.
Because you're taking off only like 2 meters from the plunger.
Right.
Because that's where the most power is. And maybe in their later sort of designs, you won't have to take off that close. So they have to have 2 lifeguards in the water, 1 for the left and right, 2 on land.
So that's 8 lifeguards in the water in total, 2, 4, 6, 8?
Yep. 8 in the water, then 2 on land, sort of 1 watching the left and 1 watching the right on each wave to make sure people don't, kill themselves or hit their head.
It's concrete after all.
Yeah. So you're talking about like 16 staff members already. Plus you got your engineers sort of looking at the plunger. It'd take 30 guys to run it. And you think with the wages that people are earning now in Australia, just doing some quick maths on that, it's a really significant amount of money.
So in that case, do you see it as being something that can be sustainable? Like how does a business like that make profit?
Well, I think the only way it's going to make profit is it needs to charge a high entry fee.
I mean, urban surf's expensive enough. Like if you want a surf expert, we're looking at $150 an hour.
Is it? Yeah.
Yep.
Well, this one would have to be about the same, I'd say.
Do you think that obviously limits business opportunities though, right?
It does, but I think in the future people will pay it.
Because surfing, there's more surfers in the water, yep.
And I'll tell you the reason why I think the surf lake is the best one. Firstly, the waves are the most sort of realistic, like a normal wave. And the main thing is because it's a circle, the opportunities for different, bars and restaurants around it or, hotels.
Yeah, of course.
Are so much better than all the other ones.
Yeah.
So, if we're talking purely, money perspective.
Big business models, yep.
Big business models.
And I think this is what Urban Surf did with Sydney, right? Like
correct.
Urban Surf in Melbourne, again, was a prototype. They put it out in an industrial estate with a bunch of containers, made it work. And obviously learnt from that. Gone on to build this beautiful centre out at Sydney. I haven't been there yet. I know Chris Watson, one of our co-hosts, he was there today or yesterday.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. There's hotels, there's retail shops.
Yeah. And that's, I think you and I went to Urban Surf in Melbourne probably 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, early days.
And that was even when I went there at that stage, that was the thing that shocked me so much, is how many sort of people that didn't even really surf were there.
Yep.
You know, coming to the Blue Ducks restaurant,
free
having
Blue Ducks,
breakfast, you know, a few beginners floating around. So that, if we're talking about it purely from a money perspective, the surf lake, because you've got the full circle, you can have, you know, a sunrise breakfast bar, you know, looking in the right direction.
And then a
sunset bar over the other side of the pool. You know, you can have one restaurant that's looking directly into a slab, you know, a hotel here. So I think that's what the guys are sort of shooting for. But yeah, the challenges are huge though as well. You know, just because it's such new and kind of novel technology.
Yep.
And you're, you know, bloody 2 meters away from a massive rusty mining plunger. You know, you try getting any council in Australia to approve that. Yeah. I think that's the problem that they're running into at the moment.
You mean just being in Australia in general?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Too much red tape. I've got one more question about wave pools before we wrap this up, mate.
Yep.
Some big news that's just come out in the kind of bodyboarding community. Surfing Australia have just announced that they're running the 2025 Nationals at Urban Surf in Sydney. Fair bit of backlash from the bodyboarding community. In saying that, there isn't a great deal of bodyboarding representation at that kind of national level.
Yep.
What's your take on their decision to do so, and what would you suggest for people that are involved in bodyboarding administration moving forward to do in order to have a greater endpoint at that national level? Do you think you need more people on the board of directors at each state, or do you think bodyboarding needs to try and separate from Surfing Australia? Obviously, working with Surfing Australia has a lot of perks, and there's a lot of great people that work there, and especially at state level.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, their hands are also tied a lot of the time. So what do you think?
Well, mate, I was involved in the administration in the sport when, you know, the joining and not joining to Surfing Australia stuff was going on.
Yep.
And I think at the amateur level, I think it's beneficial for the sport, because you're just talking about people that just want to compete for a bit of fun. You know, they want a safe experience.
Yep.
You know, part of a big competition kind of venue. So I don't know. I think we're starting to go down a bit of a dangerous path when you're having the Australian national titles in a wave pool. But there's absolutely no doubt that people all around the world are warming to wave pools. And it wouldn't surprise me in the, you know, near future if there's some sort of just wave pool tour, and you're going to get a specialist group of bodyboarders or surfers that have never surfed in the ocean that will just absolutely tear wave pools apart.
Kind of like that old flow rider stuff, yeah?
Exactly. And what did we used to call them? The flow rats.
Yeah.
You know, that, up at Dreamworld, and that was just a flow rider that didn't even have a curl or anything or a barrel.
But then there was those guys in South Africa that really developed their skills from, I think there was an A-front, like a left and a right in Durban.
Can you remember the names of some of those? Was Wesley Fisher?
Yeah, Wes Fisher. I mean, Sasha Specker was there too.
He was, yeah. There was one, was there a guy, was it Vijay Maharaj?
Oh, I can't remember.
Mate, we'll look it up after, if I got that one. But yeah, to answer the question, you know, I'm sure that there's some commercial reasons for Surfing Australia to be running their Aussie titles at a wave pool. But you know, it starts sucking the heart and soul out of a sport to do that.
Yeah, I just think the general consensus so far from the guys that are still involved in the sport and running great events is that, you know, they've seen it as a bit of we've been put to the back seat. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong, wave pools are great, and they're a great training ground. But from a progressive point of view, you're very limited. Like the wave it's 3 foot.
Yeah.
It gives everyone equal opportunity.
Yeah.
But you can't go big. You just can't.
And that's, you know, we haven't touched on that much in this podcast, but that's why, you know, so long ago, Liam O'Toole and I started the free surf sort of model. Yeah. Because the traditional competition model doesn't really suit bodyboarding.
Not really.
Because most of the waves we want to surf are at remote locations. They hardly work properly, and
you can't get permits to run an event there.
Correct.
Yep.
So I still support the amateur level going through Surfing Australia. I think that's great for them. But if you want to surf proper waves, it's not going to happen in a wave pool.
Mate, I reckon we've covered a fair bit here.
Yeah.
So let's wrap things up. As we do in every podcast, we have a bunch of quick fire questions.
Yep.
I've thrown in a hairy one straight away for you solely because I know you well.
Yeah.
You're a big fan of karaoke, mate. What's your favourite karaoke song?
Mate, it's Montel Jordan, This Is How We Do It. And I actually saw him live up in Brisbane the other week, and it was just like, I couldn't even mime it while I was watching him. It was so good.
Were you like a teenager at a Taylor Swift concert?
Oh, mate, I was. A giggling little girl jumping up and down.
Are you still picking up the microphone now at 40?
Yeah, every now and then.
Yep.
Yeah, on a, Friday, Saturday night, nothing to do.
Was there karaoke at the wedding?
There was. Yeah, 3 songs. I think I did Baby Give It Up. This Is How We Do It. And maybe like an old Coolio song.
Everything's kind of 90s, 80s, 90s with you, isn't it? Yep.
Yeah.
Mate, great segue. Favourite band?
I'm liking this guy at the moment out of Florida called Jesse Nash.
Okay.
It's sort of like cruisy country music kind of stuff.
Yeehaw.
Yeah, it's good.
I mean, you spend a lot of time in the mountains over there, mate.
Yeah.
Becoming a bit of a country guy.
Yeah.
Favourite film? This is non-bodyboarding.
Okay. Not a big movie guy, so it's like something super cheesy like Ace Ventura.
Not Point Break.
No. Yeah.
Favourite car? Is it the new one? Is that the favourite, or is there one from the past?
Oh, I like the big American trucks, like a Dodge Ram. That sort of thing.
They're really making a mark in Oz now.
Yeah.
Is that the next on the list?
Possibly, but you need 150 grand to get one and
a good parking space.
Yeah, exactly.
A favourite TV show?
Liking Yellowstone at the moment.
It's a cracker. It's a favourite with a lot of guests, mate.
Yeah.
A favourite bodyboarding film?
Far out. That's a tough one.
Australian made?
Nah.
You backed that a bit, did you?
How to? Remember that? No.
I think I gave some moral support to Dave for that.
Yeah. No, I like some of the remember some of the old like Mickey Smith films, like
ABC.
ABC.
So good.
And what was his one even before that? Like, I'm thinking like split. It's not Split Ends.
No, it had Against the Grain.
Against the Grain. Yeah.
Yep.
I used to love those movies. The soundtrack was epic.
A lot of that kind of Super 8 grainy stuff. Yep.
Cool New Waves.
Who was on ABC? Was that Crashy Benwell?
Yeah.
Harry Dixon?
Harry Dixon. Yeah.
Didn't one of those guys like do a cliff jump and like bust their leg?
I think so.
Yeah.
I can't remember which one.
I remember watching that for the first time and thinking, how the fuck do those guys like fund that trip? Like those guys were barely sponsored.
Yeah.
Like they were ready for like 3-4 months.
Well, remember they used to do that lab ratting?
Oh,
They used to go and like test out
and Scott Rigby did that too, right?
Testing medicines and stuff in like Pommy hospitals.
Yeah.
I still remember from that. Remember they were some of the first guys to surf that Eileen's wave in Ireland and like tried to paddle to it from like a boat ramp 3 or 4 Ks away or something just nuts.
Bizarre.
Yeah.
Bizarre.
Proper adventure.
Favourite film section from a bodyboarding flick?
I like some of Hardy's sections from the Rome movies.
Yep.
I can't... The one where he's in South Oz, like surfing that right.
Is that in Rome?
I think it's in Rome too.
Right.
I can't... I really like those, mate. They are insane.
Mate, he's still got it.
Oh, definitely.
There's going to be multiple answers for this one, mate. Have you ever been mistaken for someone famous? David Hasselhoff comes to mind. A couple of those slow-mo films of you in lifeguard gear.
Yeah, in the old dickies running along the beach. Not really, not that I can think of. There might be some. We'll think about it later.
First board, a banana.
It was a Manta Concept.
Nice.
Like, the little wings on the side.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Was that a Christmas present or?
I think I went and bought it.
Yep.
I think I was walking past the shop and maybe a City Beach or something
How'd you
dodgy.
get pocket money back then, mate? Were you working as a kid?
I used to deliver the Sun newspaper.
On a bike?
Yep.
Yep. What, 10, $15 a week or something?
Yeah, something like that.
Gold.
10 cents paper. Yeah.
Favourite wave?
Far out.
Say Ann Street. Say Ann Street.
Nah. I reckon the Bommy at Kingscliff when it's on.
Yeah, outer Bommy?
Outer Bommy. Yeah.
The left or the right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That place is awesome.
Mate, I still have this, speaking of Ann Street, I have this image in my head. It's in there for life.
Yeah.
We're up there for I think it was a QAB event before it turned to Bodyboarding Queensland. You were head judge, but you snuck out for a pre-game surf and forgot to come in for the start of the event. And I don't know, whatever it was, like Cadets was out there first. Yeah. And you went right and you did this air rev and you actually landed on the cadet and he hurt himself and he got knocked from the heat and then his mum or dad came in and gave you a spray.
I remember that.
Classic.
Yeah. Far out.
You didn't answer the question. Favourite wave?
Yeah, the Bommy.
Oh, Bommy. You said that.
Bommy.
Yep. A favourite surf trip?
I did. My brother and I did a trip to Simaloo 2 years ago, which is a weird little island off the coast of Sumatra.
Yep.
And mate, that was a really good surf trip. No one there, and when I say no one, I mean absolutely no one.
I think you showed me some footage from that trip. Yeah.
There's undiscovered waves everywhere.
Yep.
Up there. So that was a really cool one.
Why was that so empty? Because I mean, that part of the world is just so.
It was at the end of COVID.
Right.
So we were on one of the first flights from out of Australia into Indo.
Gotcha.
After COVID. So there were no surfers there. Just all locals that had been locked down for years.
So the water would have been clean too.
Mate, other than a few dirty thongs floating around, it was really clean.
Mother Nature was giving back.
Yeah.
Favourite move?
Mate, I like these days because I'm getting a bit older and not as nimble. Nice cutty reverse.
Yep. It's not that
feeling
really
good.
Tight forward spin in the pocket I've seen you do.
No, mate, I don't know if I can do that anymore. but yeah, just a nice cutty reverse. Burn it out on the face and back in, I think.
And what's your favourite board? What are you riding now?
I ride found boards now. I've had a couple of really good ones. But
were they the customs that Redders was making?
Yeah. When they first started. And I think Mitch is getting them sort of produced in some of the factories now, but they're still pretty good.
Yep.
But yeah, really like them.
Unfortunately, you just don't see a lot of board companies having that custom shaper working for them anymore. Like back in the day, there used to be so many collabs. Like again, you had Ed, you had Tully, you had Mez, you had JG, you had Dan Sviss.
Yeah.
I'd love to see those guys coming back to do collab stuff because, I mean, custom boards, particularly for pro riders, like they make a difference.
Yeah.
They make a huge difference.
Yeah, I think that was it was a weird stage when they even started getting pro guys riding like just knockouts from the factory.
Yeah, stockies.
Because, before that, the pro guys always used to get their own boards done. And I remember even when I was a Grom getting one off some of the pro guys and just like, what is this thing? Like, it's just so much better. Yep. Like, felt better, went better. But yeah, you're right. It's a shame that stage is done.
Well, can always make a comeback.
Yeah.
So big shout out to the board companies. Do better.
Yeah.
Do better.
Exactly.
All right, mate. Well, thank you so much for your time. Absolutely honoured to have been invited up to your beautiful home here in Burleigh Heads. Mate, don't know what else to say. I'm chuffed.
Yeah.
This chat was long overdue. Big shout out to all the guys that helped the Closeout Bodyboarding podcast. Shano, Watto, MJ, Rob Porteous, Sammy Watson. There's about 40 other guys that I forget their names. And yeah, everyone that keeps subscribing to the channel. Appreciate it. See you next time. Thanks for coming on, Danny.
Thanks, Benny. Cheers, mate.